Hello, welcome everyone to Soul Horse Sunday. I'm Delea with True North Equestrians, and today my guest for the conversation is Schelli Whitehouse. A lot of you probably already know her. She's a master at marketing your horse business. So we're going to have a conversation today on her theory and her philosophy on how horses relate to our soul journey and our spiritual journey. So Schelli, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself a little and then take off?
Thanks, Delea. I've been really looking forward to this conversation with you. So a little bit about me is I've been working in the horse and human potential area for almost 15 years now, and have learned a lot about myself and others and horses, so much more about horses on this journey. And their soul calling is, and what I'm finding about how horses facilitate learning for humans, and that our partnership with them, and that can come in so many different varieties, different relationships is what they are, because it's kind of like not one size fits all. And I feel like that's the same for most humans. Not every we don't like every single person we meet. We may be kind to them, we may tolerate them, we may even work for them sometimes, but and same with horses. Just because you put two horses together doesn't mean they want to get along or that they can get along. And so just kind of, I think part of my own soul evolution has been learning how to honor the evolution and the respect for other sentient beings, and how that has, informed my relationship with humans as well.
Yeah, interesting. I have nice animals. I mean, when people like my dogs, even my cat and my horses, people often comment about how nice they are. They're just easy. And my theory is exactly based on that. I try to look at them as to who they are, what they need, and not try to force anything upon them. I try to force very little upon any of my animals. Occasionally you have to load the horse in the thunderstorm or whatever, but I try not to force things because I look at it like it's their life too. Exactly. And even though they seem to be at the mercy of humans in a way, and in a way they are, they also came to us for some kind of a purpose. And so I always try to keep that in mind. So it's interesting that you say that. Yes, I think by recognizing them as sentient beings and autonomous beings, that we can get so much more information rather than putting them all into one size fits all, or a horse is a horse, or a dog is a dog.
Exactly. And we have our little pockets of people who understand this, and we just talk, and our conversations are like, well, of course, like that's what it is. But I also live and work in an environment often where it's much more traditional in terms of how horses are cared for, and the jobs that they do or are required to do. And it's hard. I try not to be judgmental about it. I see it, I witness it, and and most of those people really love their horses. They love their horses in the way that they know how, or the way they've been taught, or what they believe is the right way, even though they live in a jail cell 14 hours a day, and are turned out in a paddock by themselves, and they're not allowed to get dirty, and it's like,
that's a weird one for me.
And so, and also, and this sounds like a non sequitur, but it's not, but I really believe in the vibration of our language and our words. And when people say, oh, my horse is such a dum-dum, or gosh, he's an idiot, or he's just a troublemaker, or that one's evil, or it's like, stop saying those words. Like, stop saying that.
I know. And stop. I know. And stop assigning them that description.
Yes.
Stop making that who they are.
Exactly. Because then we start projecting that kind of behavior on them.
Absolutely.
Instead of allowing them, to be themselves, or, some horses have different sense of humors. I've got a horse that is a total, I say he's he's a cross between Aslan the lion, the sage, you know, and Scooby-Doo. He's like, he's a master facilitator and a goofball, you know, he can be both.
So it keeps him in balance.
Yeah. And I think, and how horses can reflect aspects of ourselves. And he does reflect that aspect of me. Like I can go really deep and be very serious and get into the meat and potatoes of what's transpiring. And then at the same time, I can, let's play. This has to be fun too.
Right. So I see a witness to this everywhere, like even on Facebook. And I know a lot of things are contrived on Facebook, but there are so many videos now where animals are interacting more as personalities and representations of themselves, authenticity, just in everything. Like they'll show the picture of the deer and the dog, and all those things. And it's like we're finally just a little tiny opening, a little crack into how that we all matter and how that we all have a life that affects us, and I grew up in an environment where animals don't have souls, so they didn't matter. And so and so that was a big deal. I wrestled with that for a long time. But once you understand that they do have a soul, first of all, it rocks your world, because then you start looking at food animals and you start looking at how animals are treated, and it becomes much more serious and much more intense for you. Like once you acknowledge that, you really can't go back. But it's really interesting because I see it coming out in social media everywhere, how that people are starting to acknowledge that all these other animals have all of these, they have like a life of their own. And before they were all grouped into their deer, and sometimes I wonder about deer myself.
Well, they're just livestock. They're just here. Yeah.
Well, I'm always amazed that, deer will be born on the property, and yet their whole life for the next 7 years, they spook at the cars. I don't understand, but it's a deer. So, but I know that their lives matter to them. And when we start looking at that as a consciousness, it changes how we relate to them in every way. So I know that in your business with guiding people or entrepreneurs in equine industries, I know that not all of them are probably relating to therapy and soulful relationships. So when you are working with these people, do you find that the horses show up and want to offer input when you're trying to help someone come up with a business?
Well, yes and no. And yes, and that if they already have horses of their own. Okay, first of all, I'm going to back up a little bit, because here's one of the things about marketing that this is like part of my tenets is when your marketing is in alignment with the people you most want to serve, then those people resonate with your marketing and are more likely to reach out with you. And so I'm very my language is very specific. Like I say, words matter. And my language is very specific about the kind of work that I do and the kind of people that I work with. And so another way of identifying the kinds of clients I work with would be they're the soulful service providers. They want their business to be in alignment with their own core values, their own soul's calling, as well as their horses. So I very rarely have people who are not in alignment with the kind of where this conversation is going. And when I do, if there's if they're not open to that, my philosophy of horses partnering with humans, that we don't use horses, we partner with them. If the horse is not up for the job that day, or says no, or is you can tell it's not a good match for the human you're pairing them with, if you can't honor that, then I'm not interested in helping you build your business. Does that make sense? Because to me, it's just as important that the horse's input and ability to facilitate someone else's learning is honored, just as that we would the other person we're working with. And we always say, so we like to say, when somebody new is coming in to work with the horse, we say, this is challenge by choice. And it's a choice for you and it's a choice for the horse. And if either of you are like, this isn't right for me, then we will reevaluate what needs to happen next. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It also brings up the question with some days I don't feel like working.
Yeah.
And so, but I have to work, or if you already have those commitments. So how do you address that in the type of work that you market for and your clients? If the horse is not up for working that day and yet you have this appointment, how do you do that and still be respectful of the horse as a sentient being?
Right. And the client, because the client's paying you for your time and showing up and, so a couple of different things. First of all, I highly recommend that you have enough horses to do the job that you are marketing for. If you don't have enough horses to do the job, if you have one horse and you want to, have work when you have 1 to 4 people coming to work with you, if you're going to do more than 4 people, I think that's too much for your horse. But still, I really think you need 2 horses or even 3. So if your horse is not up for the job that day, you have another horse that will say, oh, I'll do it. When I facilitate large groups in say a corporate setting or something like that, we have enough facilitators that if somebody gets sick, somebody else can step in. Or if something happens, we always have an additional facilitator on site with us. So we can handle that kind of thing. And again, speaking to this, I've had a horse with a group of people. So I have 5 participants and 1 horse. There's other groups also. And about halfway through, the horse is done. Like, you know what, this isn't working for me. And so the beautiful thing is now we have a conversation about reality. Here's reality. Your herd member here is not feeling well or is feeling stressed. What can we do to help this horse either recalibrate or give it a break? And if we do have to give it a break, what's our, then there's the conversation about how does that relate to your real life? Where in your life do you need to give yourself a break, and or perhaps one of your team members or a family member? Where are they feeling pressured? Where are you putting pressure on somebody that they can't handle it, or they're ready to crash, or you're ready to crash? So when you said something about the horse reflecting the what's going on, it's all relevant. So if we can keep it in real time, like this is what's happening right now, this is reality. Let's talk about how we got to this place. And then sometimes just having that conversation and like stopping the activity and having that conversation, the energy shifts amongst the people.
Right,
and they
right.
and they start to get real. And then when they get real, they're congruent. And when they're congruent, the horse goes, oh, and starts licking and chewing and comes back to the group. So we never force the horse to complete the task. It's not about the task. It's about the communication, what the horse is sharing with us, and how does that relate to the human's real life.
So in a way, what you're saying is that the horse is bringing that aspect to the forefront. Mm-hmm. Meaning that that is part of the soul work of the horse. It's part of it's part of the spiritual experience during the journey that they're actually offering to the people.
Yes, and it's part of their experience. So this kind of, we start to step into another area here that of course it's part of the horse's soul journey, because they're a soul and we're a soul, and our souls are intermingling when we're working with them. And I hope to, and many of my colleagues and people that I work with, is to make it as enjoyable and interesting and meaningful to the horse as it is to the humans and to us. They're not a tool. They are, like I said, they're a partner. And if a horse is like, I have a horse, he's new to me. I've had him about 6 months, and he's my riding companion, and I adore him, and he's super, super sensitive. And he has some stranger anxieties. And I would never have him be a teaching horse or an equine assisted learning horse. Not at this stage in his life. And he's 10 years old. He may never want to do this kind of work, and I honor that. And, I've had other horses in my life are like, man, get out of my way. I want to work with the people, so just like we have different callings and purpose in our lives, I believe the horses do too. And discerning if working with humans in this way is part of their journey or not, I think is a responsibility we need to take really seriously.
Yes, we all hate to be assigned to jobs that we hate or environments that we hate.
Right.
So what are some ways then? Okay, so when I totally agree with that. But if people are looking, and I'm not talking about the professional aspect of this, but when people are looking to see if a horse is up for this type of, to be their partner in this type of industry, what do they look for? Do they look for a horse that does seem to be more soulfully inclined? I mean, because they're all different. Like my gray mare is very quiet, very mysterious, she's elusive, but she's also interactive. But my bay mare is just, everything's really about her. So, I mean, she would never be, and it's okay because because everything's about her, I've had to reconsider a lot of things. She's taught me amazing things because it's all about her. So I've had to rethink everything that I've known before and approach it from a different level. And I love it. It's hard at the time, but I love what happens with it. So, but Mystic is much more what I would call more soulfully in tuned. So do you find that that there are horses that feel like they actually are drawn to that kind of work, and how do they show that?
So, part of taking patience for the human. So one of the things that kind of scares me sometimes is when, I'll have a conversation with somebody that's starting a new business, or they've gone through some equine facilitated learning program, and they have some new awesome superpowers, right? Like they're starting to understand how this works. And so then they start having these visions about how they want to incorporate the work that they do with horses and who they want to serve and all of that, which is super important. And frequently I have conversations with people who really want to rescue horses and match them with, say, youth at risk or battered women. And see, that is a red flag for me. I'm not saying that it's never possible and that there aren't great horses that do that work. However, when you rescue a horse, and especially if you don't know its history, they come with trauma too.
Right.
And you can't go through talk therapy with them to figure it out. And you can't do equine assisted learning with them to figure it out. You do some actually, but they have to go through their own healing before they can hold space for somebody else's healing, because someone else's trauma can trigger their trauma, and then you have a horse that's just re-traumatized, and I think it's a burden, and then there's all kinds of projection happens, and it's not a clear line of communication, and I don't believe that it really serves the person either. So I believe if you have the patience and you have the wherewithal and the time to work with a rescue horse and introduce them to this work slowly, a little at a time, give them choice so they can come and go, and just notice, how do they respond? Do they start volunteering because they want to? Are you honoring the fact that when they're done, they need clearing? And are you providing clearing? Energetic clearing, whether it's Reiki or some kind of help to help them clear the energy of other traumatized people who are probably projecting onto them. Because some horses will take it on.
Oh yeah, right.
Or they've been taught to take it on, or that they're a good horse if they take it on. It's like, no, we don't want them to take it on. No. So there's all those different elements. I mean, you know about all of this so deeply. Yeah.
That triggers something that happened to me when I was back in Colorado for a couple of years. I had wanted this chant was really green, and I have a friend here that was helping me with her, but she had only been ridden. I usually start my own horses because if you know your horse, you can start them, but I don't know proper, how to get them to round and use their body better. I don't know those things. So, but I can get on them and go down the trail just fine. But I had wanted a lesson from this guy because I was there and I didn't have any horse friends anymore. And I wanted a lesson from, actually it's Nishan Cook. A lot of people know his name. And I had met him I had met him at the expo, and he was doing a clinic. So I drove 2 hours to get to that clinic, spent the night so I could be there in the morning with my horse for a lesson. And she was fine. We'd been all around the barn, hanging out, walking, and I was tacking her up from my lesson. And a horse on the next property just started screaming. It was horrific. And I'm an empath, so I was just freaked out by it. And Chant just lost her mind. And there was another horse tied to a trailer, maybe 200 feet away, standing there at her hay bag. And what that taught me was that it opened my eyes. I should have known this, but I didn't, that horses can also be empaths. And that really, it was an unfortunate situation because I ended up not even riding her during that lesson. Nishan got on her a little bit and he kept telling me, you have the horse you have today. And it's not what I wanted to hear because I wanted the horse that I normally have. But after that experience, it really broadened my perspective into the world of horses. And I don't believe that I anthropomorphize on that. That's a really fine topic that a lot of people will say that you do or you don't. But the fact that they say their horse is grouchy that day, is that anthropomorphizing on them? So
it's called emotions.
Am I anthropomorphizing to say that she had lost her mind? She's really kind of tall anyway, and high-headed, and she kept looking over there, and it was really a horrible sound. So one of the guys who worked there actually came up to us and he held her while I got on, and because she was just really beside herself. And I said, what's going on over there? And he says, that guy isn't very nice to his horses. So I don't even know what was going on. I don't know, but the horse would just scream. And it went on for probably 45 minutes. And so I really learned a valuable lesson that day out of a horrible situation, that horses also can be empathic. So if you're talking about working, like if you have a rescue horse that's had a trauma, and then, or even a horse that hasn't, but they're just hypersensitive, and they're with someone with trauma, and then they can totally take on that emotion, it makes sense that not every horse would be beneficial to work in a therapy program because they just can't handle it. They take it on too much.
And what can happen is then, if they're forced to stay in that situation, is then they can actually either start to, get out of control themselves, or they can disassociate.
Yeah.
And then they're being obedient, but they're not really there.
Yeah, they've disconnected. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's not really helpful to the client either.
Right.
So there's a fine line, and it's understanding, it's being able to understand what the horse needs and support from you, and preparing the people that are working with your horses on how to be with them. Unfortunately, there's programs out there that will just throw people out there with the horses because they want to see what happens. They want to see the human's default behavior come up or whatever. And it's like, no matter how much you prepare a human, you put them in a situation where they're uncomfortable or they've never been before, their default behavior is going to come up anyway. And so you might as well prepare them to the best of your ability to, and also that's not fair to the horse. If someone say, they're like, oh, here, go put this halter on the horse, and the person doesn't know what the heck they're doing. Well, that's not fair to the horse, to have the halter, hung upside down and too tight or too loose, or it's disrespectful. And anyway, that's just my philosophy. I don't want to really go down that path too much.
Okay, but this is down the path of how you probably got into your work, is by identifying with the horse as an independent sentient being, which is part of incorporating the soul of that horse. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how you actually decided to move into some of this. I think you did some equine assisted therapy programs, right? You took some training. Didn't you study with Linda Kohanoff or?
Yes.
Yes.
So equine assisted learning, equine facilitated learning, not therapy. So actually
Okay.
I did do EGALA training back in the beginning, and it was more therapeutic based, more therapy based. But I never really practiced that model or worked with therapists. I went into the coaching aspect of
Mhm.
facilitation. I'm a certified coach with or without horses. And so I bring that to the equation and integrate the learning with horses and coaching. So I guess for if somebody's wondering, well, what's the difference? A facilitated experience is where the human, your client and horse has an experience, and they may go through a set of exercises together, or an exercise, or maybe just standing outside a pen and having, observing whatever it is that you do with the horse, non-riding. And then you allow, and then the human, you may have, so, well, how was that for you? Or, what did you learn, or what did you see, kind of thing. And it's pretty much it. And then the client goes on their merry way and has a nice life, and that's pretty much it. Equine assisted coaching is where you generally have a more robust plan for your client, where you're going to be with them over a period of time. And it may include in-person work with the horse as well as phone conversations. And you spend more time actually integrating the learning so that they can apply it to real life.
Okay, and in that type of work, do you find that people are interested in learning the soul of the horse, or do they believe that the horse is in their life for a reason, as far as to help them grow as an individual and as a soul?
Most of my clients who are equine assisted practitioners, absolutely yes. Like that's part of that's what gives them their mojo. Right? It's kind of like why they want to work with horses, and they want to help people, but they really want to help the horses and themselves. So, we tend to gravitate towards experiences that are going to forward our own evolution, and will teach and demonstrate or support others who are coming up behind us. And that's how we integrate it. So the more that we help others on the path, come along the path behind us, the more we integrate it into our own life until, we kind of step up. I call that, stepping up into the next highest version of you. That's when you become the next highest version of whatever the grandest vision is for your soul's journey in this process. Like we rarely go from, I don't know much about anything to, oh, I'm totally enlightened, I know everything, right? That just doesn't, maybe there's some people that happens to, and they like, oh my God, they just woke up one day and they're completely enlightened. I'm like, those people take me off, because I've been working really hard at this for a long time.
No, and actually what I think enlightenment, the more enlightened I get, it's like the less I know.
Exactly. So true. The more I know, the more I know, the more I don't know.
The more I know, the more I know that I don't know. Yeah.
Yes, that.
The more I know less. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting on that.
It's very
Actually,
humbling.
right,
It's very
yes.
humbling. And when
It is.
I think when you lean into that, it takes a lot of pressure off to have all the answers, or to be,
Yeah,
I'm not here to fix anything. And that was a huge, huge lesson for me. You don't have to fix it or make it right for everybody. I'm here to facilitate others fixing their own stuff. You know, you have to
Yeah.
do it for yourself, and I will help create the space for you to do that. Yeah.
Right. No, I get that. Okay, so in your journey with horses, I'm assuming you've been around horses for quite a while. And
Yeah.
what brought you to the realization or to the connection with your horse about its own soulful expression or desires? Do you remember how that actually came about? Was there an event, or was it just a process or something in your life that happened that caused you to look at the horse differently?
Yeah. Yeah. It almost makes me cry. I can tell you 100 of them, but probably the first time I was about 12 years old. It was my first horse. I'd ridden horses with friends and that kind of thing, but Lady, she was my first horse. And I knew nothing about taking care of a horse. My parents knew nothing about nobody. I mean, how I should never have been given a horse. But fortunately, just down the road from me, my friend, they had horses and a dairy farm, and her brother was a vet, and like they really took me under their wing and helped me take good care of my horse. But um, I had her, I don't know, a day and a half or so, and she broke out of the fence and ran down the road to be with the other horses because she was all by herself, you know, with me. And I remember, like, at first I thought, you know, just like you, like, bad horse, right? And then I realized that she was lonely. And I thought, and it made me realize that she had feelings. And
Mm,
so I would make sure, you know, I would go out of my way to make sure that she got to spend time with those other horses as much as possible. I didn't keep her down there, but in that, and that I situated her paddock so that she could see them, you know, down the road kind of thing. And then she got comfortable with her home and all. But I think that was the first time, like, I loved horses, loved them. They were pretty, and, you know, they were just, I loved them. And since the day I was born, I loved horses. But that was the first time I realized that she, you know, she had her own feelings, and that I felt it made me feel sad. And so I guess that was kind of like my own empathy towards what she was experiencing. And you know, I'm not saying that she taught me everything. She taught me a lot. Um, but she was the first, I would say, any being, human or animal, that I communicated with just like telepathically. You know, like when we would ride, I would just think something and she would, you know, we just did it like we were one unit. And that was the first time I ever had that blessing of that kind of relationship and that kind of communication. Um, and I guess truthfully, I've kind of strived for that for the rest of my life. You know, like that's the bar.
and were you able to do it with other horses in your life, or did it take more time? I mean, because you were really fortunate and insightful and enlightened to figure that out at a young age. You
I
know,
was,
something as simple as they have feelings, which is a great way for a lot of people if they're struggling with things like they're being sentient beings and all that. If they're just crossing over from a lot of mainstream, that might be a big leap. So maybe they could start with something like, you know, what are the feelings of the horse?
mhm.
Instead of moving all the way into it's a sentient being.
Yeah, of course, I didn't even know the word sentient. You know, I
Right.
don't think I learned sentient until I was like 50 or 45. Like I really didn't know sentient, but then,
Yeah.
you know, in that capacity. Um, oh yeah, and just the whole, you know, like the thought of them having their whole, uh, like their collective soul families and things like that never, nothing like that ever entered my consciousness at that time. I wasn't even sure I believed in soul family. You know, I wasn't even sure I believed in God at that point. So, or anything. Um, or my interpretation was much different. Let's put it that way. I think, you know, people will come to this, you know, like, you know, the saying, the teacher will appear when the student is ready, or when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I believe that. And I believe it's happening more and more and more.
Yes.
I was just having this conversation with the osteopath who was working with my horse today. And she's like, because we were talking about animal communication and we were talking about horses and the trauma, how trauma affects them physically. And I don't mean physical trauma, I mean emotional trauma. And same with humans. We store emotional trauma in our bodies, and it manifests as physical pain or discomfort or disease. And same for our animals. And she says, because I've been doing this a really long time. She goes, and just in this last year, I'm having more and more conversations like this with my clients, where before I really wouldn't go there because, they think I was a little too woo-woo or whatever. And it's like, oh no, we can have many conversations about this. And I'm like, that's why I asked you to come here, is because I know he's got trauma stored in his body that we want to, and you can't just like go, click, 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 click. Okay, done. You should be perfect now. It comes out in layers. Like we peel those things away in layers, just like our own stuff.
Right. And I agree. And I'm so grateful that it is becoming more accepted. I mean, in reality, what is it you think? Maybe 10 to 15% of the United States would be more inclined to this type of thinking. But it was maybe, 1% even 10 years ago. And it really is starting to catch on. And people are becoming more open to the idea that horses or animals in general, but my conversation is about horses, have something to contribute in more of a soulful way. And that they also contribute to our learning as equestrians in general, rather than we know everything and you're going to do what I say. And that's been the model for a long, long time. But and the interesting thing is, once, at least in my life, once you become open to that, and I have to say, Chant, my bay mare, who I've had for, I guess, almost 5 years now, she is the one who really brought me along that way. Before then, my horses do what I call draw me into the mystery. They kind of take me out of my head and away from all the thinking, and I just get to hang out there for a while, which is very restorative for me and very essential. But Chant is the one who's actually got me to rethink a lot of the things that I have incorporated into how I was with horses before. And, most of the things I say work. It's a little bit of effort. She's taught me about what I call the equestrian namaste, about meeting with them, greeting what's divine within them, my divine within me, so that we have less conflict. And it works.
That equestrian namaste. I love that.
Equestrian namaste. It works amazingly. And I've had examples of it when I was riding, where she can be a little forward, and she's a big, strong horse and just a little bit more animated than I'm used to with my other horse. But when I learned to tune back into that, okay, my physical being is a little anxious here about this, but what's divine within me connects with what's divine within her. And it's amazing. I haven't gotten hurt during any of those times. I haven't came off or anything. But because of her, I've had to explore that, because I knew I couldn't dominate her. I'm really bad at fighting. I'm going to lose. I don't fight because I lose. I mean, now if you mess with my animals, I might rip your head off. But anything other than that, I'm a bad fighter. I don't want to argue. I'm going to lose because my heart isn't in it. Yeah. So I knew that I had to find a way. And so because of her resistance, and because of her being a little more animated and anxious, I had to discover that. It's been incredibly valuable. So she has been the teacher. She has been the sage that has taught me how to look deeper in myself and align with my horses on more of a soul level.
I love that. I love that. And just acknowledge, well, also you acknowledging the divine in yourself brings you back to yourself. And anxiety is about fear of what's might happen, because she's
outside yourself. Right? Yes,
exactly. So it's your projection of what could happen. And also it reminds me, and this is something I practice too, is the picture. So animals will receive our information via pictures, right? And if we can picture before we even get on what's going to happen, so they understand. So picture the whole saddle process. We're going to put the saddle on, and I'm going to pick up the blanket, and I'm going to, just take a moment to like visualize all the things you're going to do. And then I'm going to get on, and we're going to go. And when we see something that we're not familiar with, we're going to take a deep breath. It's like, so when you get to that space and you take that deep breath, and you're like, and the divine in me recognizes the divine in you, and they're like, oh yeah, I knew this was going to happen. Kind of, we can prepare them for that. I'm learning this stuff too, because that's not how I was taught.
Right,
And now I have a horse that's super sensitive and needs that kind of support.
Right. Yeah, my gray mare is super sensitive. And when I got her, natural horsemanship, I've had her for 20 years. And so that was, on the rise. And I'm so grateful for it. I don't do a lot of those things. I think I've seen people who do natural horsemanship, and they're constantly moving their horse around. I know people that their horse can't stand for a minute. They move their hind end, they move their front end, they back, and it's like, give the horse a bloody break, and just be with the horse. But it's still better than how, I'm the rider and you'll do what I say.
Right.
So, but with Mystic, I was into that, and I made a lot of mistakes just because she's so sensitive. And it took me a while, but she taught me about learning to read the body of the horse more, and learning to read the reactions. I mean, we know you can study and read in the book, what this means and what that means. But once you tune in and do what I consider to like tune into their energy flow, it all changed. And it took a while because a lot of my habits came back up, and it took a long time, but by being able to, like I said, she draws me into the mystery, which draws me out of my head, which draws me into more of what I call that between the worlds things, where we both have a place to co-create and to kind of be known, is what I would call it, is when we're not. So because that way, when we're in between the worlds, she's detached a little bit from her nature as a horse. She's very reactive nature, and I'm detached a little bit as a human from my mental agenda. And so it makes things a little bit less, it has more flow, and it makes things a little bit less absolute. Actually, it makes it a lot less absolute. So that is
because then you have space for what wants to happen. Like you said, you're co-creating. I really love your description of that. And then the other thing is, like in my case, like I have a horse that has never been asked his opinion of any, like he's never had anybody ask him his opinion or had permission to say, what's true for him.
Reveal themselves, yeah.
Right. Or if he did, it wasn't honored anyway. So, just kind of give up. And he's just learning that it's safe to do that. And so I think now we're at the space where I'm kind of like, now I want to know what brings him joy. Right? Like he's trusting the process, he's trusting the relationship, though I still don't see, like my other horse was just so darn demonstrative. And he's not, he's sweet, but I don't know like what his sense of humor is, or if he's ever had, what does he like to do to play? Because lots of horses have big play drives.
Right. Well, geldings do.
Yeah, and he's a gelding.
Mare's not as much.
Well, now let's not put them all in one. I had a very playful mare. But anyway, yeah, it's that kind of thing. It's like, now I'm curious as to, okay, what brings him joy? I want to learn more about that so that I can provide that kind of stimulation or environment for him. Because, we were talking about natural horsemanship. So one natural horsemanship trainer that there are certain things, that little sayings that have stuck to me, but he would say, can you be as entertaining for your horse as your horse is for you? I mean, can you allow your horse, is your horse getting as much enjoyment out of the relationship as you are?
Right.
And I think that's something
that's a valid question. Yes.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Interesting, because what I do with my horses, and I've done this for years, is I hand walk a lot. And to me, that is, and I'm usually lucky I can take them off the property or take them to a property where they always are.
Right.
And so actually, even now, I have to board my horses where I live now, and I take them, I trailer them. I just trailered them Sunday. We went up almost 20 miles away to a picnic, and we hung out for about 3 hours at one of my favorite places. And I do that a lot, or I just hand walk them a lot. But I have to say, those are the times that I actually feel like they give me more information and I understand more about them. Because there again, we're kind of like in between. I don't have an agenda. They're just doing what they want to do. And I understand. It's taught me to understand how they express themselves more and how they're able to like relax and enjoy my company more. So
Yeah.
it's interesting
Right.
how
That you're
that
like you said, there's not always an agenda, that you can
right.
be together, that you enjoy their company and conversation,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And it's not about every time you see me, I'm going to make you do something.
yeah. No, I don't. Yeah, yeah. And I think that's an unfortunate thing. In fact, I just did a short video on that. My theory was people who never spend time just being with their horse, they've robbed themselves of a great treasure because they've never really known their colleague. You know, you may use that horse in any kind of a sport or discipline, and you know, as long as the horse likes to do that and you're providing everything the horse needs to perform that sport, you know, that's fine. But when you only use them for that sport, you have truly lost out so much because you don't even know your working partner.
Right.
You know, even most people with their coworkers, they go out for drinks or something. They have a company day or something where they'll spend time together. But if you never do that with your horse, you have lost.
I
You've lost
agree.
so much.
I so agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. I know.
Okay.
Now I
Go
want to
ahead.
go hang out with my horse.
I know, me too. Yeah, I know. I know. I just get that drive that I need to be there and find that balance within their company.
Yeah.
And
When I travel, because I travel for work and such, and I'm gone for a long time, I'm like, I just want to get home and be out there with my horse. I really just want to get home. I mean, and my husband too. I love my husband. But man, I don't know. I just
but
miss
the horse,
that. And even though I'm working with horses and other people's horse, but it's like it's a different relationship, and it's downtime, where we could just hang out.
my max to be away from my horses is 2 weeks.
Yeah,
I
that's a
don't
long
think I've
time.
ever been away longer than 2 weeks if I go on vacation, because I just don't want to be, I don't want to be away from them more.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so the 3-week trip in Europe isn't going to work for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you have any more examples or experiences that you want to talk about to where you know that you've completely been aligned with your horse's soul, your soul and your horse's soul have participated in your journey together?
Yes, a few, yes. One with my own horse. I have two really, really powerful, like bring you to your knees experiences that, with my own horse, it was, we kind of touched on it in the beginning of the conversation about the recognition of them as a sentient being, and not just a sentient being as a horse, but as an autonomous soul. And this is when the whole concept of buying or selling a horse, just like, I wanted to throw up. I just couldn't. And I still really struggle with it, because you said, like, once you know, you can't unknow.
Right.
And same kind of with, the animals for food and such, but that's a different conversation. But I was so struck by how we callously buy and sell horses, and the value that we project onto them as whether they're, what they're worth, and almost seems like the more expensive the horse, really the less we value them as a sentient being. But I was really struck by that, and I was sobbing, like I was just, and it just came over me so hard. And I was with my horse cruiser, And I was just telling him, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just, please forgive me for that. The way that I held that and have held it, and all the people that do, like, I just felt like I was apologizing for our whole society. And I literally was like on the ground, like on my knees. And because I just couldn't stand up, I was crying so hard. And he came over, and I'm out in the paddock. I was like with four horses and maybe 3 other horses and cruiser, and they're all not paying any attention. And he comes over and he brings his head down to me, and he puts his eye right up to my face. Like, it was this acknowledgement. It was like and it wasn't even like, I forgive you so much. It's just, it's, we're here together. Like, it's okay. I feel I'm with you. And he stayed with me for a really long time. And we've had other experiences together. Like, I'm telling you, he's a teaching horse, and he teaches other horses too, and that's another thing I got to go back to. How do you know if your horse is good for this? If you have horses that love it and are good for it, put them with other horses that you think might be good for it, because they will teach them. But anyway, that was such a powerful thing, to forgive myself and release all that stuff. And then, so I was trying to figure out how to reframe that. Because that is how horses get exchanged, or, even if you're rescuing a horse, you're giving a contribution to the rescue and all that. And so for me personally, the way I reframed it is that I think of the payment if you're buying a horse, as a marriage contract. Because for me, they're not going anywhere once they're with me.
Right, me either.
Right. unless there's a better home for their needs. And then, I haven't sold a horse since. And I'll just give them, I just want the horse to have a better life. And so I think of it as a marriage contract, and that we're now bonded. And this was the tithe I had to give to have you come into my life. And so I think of it more that way. And it's not like I buy and sell horses. I can't sell horses. It's not, I can't do it.
I know.
So that was
Yeah.
one, but so the other one was the very first, I would say, soul experience. Like, overall, this is the most spiritual thing that has ever happened to me, was with someone else's horse. It was actually, she was a student of Linda Kahanav's, and she had kind of just graduated Linda's program. And I wanted to have the experience. I had read the Tao of Equus, and I was like, I want to have that. I'm like, oh my God, this exists. Like, I want to do this. Like, this is going to be my life's work. I knew it immediately. And I'm like, I have to have the experience. I've been around horses for a long time, but okay, it was blowing my mind. So I went and had an experience with this woman. Happened to be in Colorado. And we were out in a pasture with several other horses. And she said, just walk around and see who volunteers or whatever. And so this one horse came up, and we were hanging out, and I started, I was petting him. And then she said, she suggested I just lift my hands up, like, not touch him. Now we're out in this big field of green grass, and he's standing right with me, and all these other horses are grazing, and he's not eating, he's with me. And I'd never had that experience before. Like, my experience with horses is you go and you catch the horse and you bring him in and you do the stuff, whatever you're doing. And you play your natural horsemanship games. And so I lifted up my hands, and I moved back to his, around his hips, and my hands got really, really hot. And I'd never had that experience before either. And then then it was like this heat was just, and light was just coming down right through my whole body and out my hands and my feet. And I'd never had that experience before. And she said, she was a good facilitator. She said, step away from the horse and explain what's going on. She asked, is there a color? Like, she was trying to help me navigate this through my body, whatever was happening. And I just had tears coming down. I was just crying. And she's like, so what, how can you describe this? I said, the only words I have, it's like, because I was like electricity. Said, I think it's love. This is love. And I can feel it right now. And that was I believe, my initiation to this work with horses, this journey of facilitation and holding space for the horses and the humans to take this evolutionary walk together.
Interesting, because what I was thinking of when you said that is that was your anointing. You were called then.
Yeah, so it was the anointing or the yeah, and oh boy, I had interesting dreams after that too. Yeah. I can re-experience that almost like it was yesterday. It was really, and that was 15, almost 16 years, 15 years ago.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay, so we're going to be nearing the end of our conversation here. Do you want to go ahead and just, tell people how they can get a hold of you? A few minutes about your work. I mean, we've dabbled on the topic of your work, but actually about your work now and your book. You have a couple of books.
I have 2 books. I have my first book is called The Business of Coaching with Horses, and the second book should be out first part of December this year, 2022. And it's called The 7 Systems of Prosperity for Equine Inspired Business. So in typical corporate language, people will hear the word SOP, like what are your standard operating procedures? And I'm like, God, that's boring. When somebody says that, I like just check out. But unfortunately, they're really important to a successful business to understand how to set those up and what they mean. And I was like, I just can't write about that. It's too boring. And it doesn't resonate with my philosophy and how I help people learn. And so I renamed them the Systems of Prosperity. So my SOPs are Systems of Prosperity. And they're much more in alignment with, how to incorporate the soul of your brand, the soul, who you are in the work that you do. So that's what's coming up. And there's lots of templates and worksheets and things like that in both books, but to help people navigate the learning. Because building a business is, it requires thinking differently. And I want the thinking to be, like I said, I want to know what brings my horse joy. I want that what brings you joy in your work with horses, I want that to come through in the building of your business. It's not so that it's not such a grind. It's not such a, now I got to put this hat on and I don't like it and marketing sucks. And now I have to do all that. Now I have to do technical stuff and I don't like technical stuff. And, all those things that people deal with that are counterintuitive to the way they want to what they already do or what they want to do. And so how can you bring your enthusiasm and your joy to all of the pieces, parts of your work so that it's holistic? So that's the second book. And people can reach me and or get those books on my website, SchelliWhitehouse.com. And it's Schelli, SCHELLI, Whitehouse, WHITEHOUSE.com. Yeah.
Okay, and I will put that link into the bottom of the video on YouTube as well.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, do you have anything else you want to contribute to the conversation, or are we Have we chatted enough?
Yeah, I will share that the work that I do with practitioners is to contribute to the ripple of horses and humans evolving together, because the more people that are capable of reaching others with their horses and the work that they do, I believe that it's going to contribute to a kinder, more enlightened population of people, of humans.
Right.
And it's happening. Like, my mission is that this becomes as popular as yoga and Starbucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
it's
it will
happening.
also help eradicate some abuse in the world.
Yeah, abuse of horses and humans,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Because when you know how to communicate clearly and effectively, you get less frustrated, you're not as likely
Right.
to, blow up yourself.
Right. And just causes us to live with more honor. Right.
Yeah, nice way to put it. So,
Okay. Well, thanks so much for being here with me today in this conversation. And thanks for joining me. And if you'd like to see,
oh, it just froze. Oh, darn. I'm gonna close my video in case that helps.